fuck you.
What's going on, everybody? So I'm just going to play this clip. I'm going to play it the whole way through, and then I will give a few of my thoughts and perspectives on it at the end.
This one is actually kind of apropos to what we're talking about today.
Which one?
The Sadia one.
Oh, you want to do that?
Yeah, let's do that one real quick.
See if I can grab her real quick. Sure. This is Sadia on Chris Williamson.
And also just kind of undoing some of the damage from the red pill conversation.
How do you mean?
Is another. I feel like it's done the exact terrible impact that feminism had at women's beliefs about men. Red pill kind of did the exact same for men. It gave them a home. For the men that hate women, it gave them a home, but it's in the wrong hands. It's okay when it's in the hands of psychologists and people who understand human nature, but when it's in the hands of a 27-year-old boy who just wants to make it in social media, or somebody whose life experience is just making TikToks, and he's the one teaching men how to view women, it's dangerous. It's super, super dangerous. So I would love to undo the damage of some of that.
There you go.
All right, what do you think? I'm curious. I don't even know, because I think a lot of the girls might not even know what the red pill community is.
So I'm just gonna tear her down here really quickly. I'm gonna quote Nick Krauser, who is, I don't know if you're familiar with him.
No.
Old school PUA guy. Nick used to say this, is that the red pill and game and pickup artistry has done more for understanding intersexual dynamics and human social sexuality in the 15 years, 20 years that it's been around than psychology or sociology has been able to do in like hundreds of years. Now we live in a society, once again, where the genie's out of the bottle and the toothpaste ain't going back in the fucking toothpaste, tube again. And to say that, oh, well, only us qualified academicians, are the ones that ought to be talking about this stuff. Well, fuck you. Because the guys who went out there during the early years, during the mid-2000s, went out there into the clubs, went out there into the field, did the field work, came back, said, you know what, this is working, this isn't working, and we ought to go back to, back and, okay, it's hypothesis, it's just the scientific method, that's all it is. It's like, did this work? This part of this hypothesis worked, but this didn't seem to, replay in the field, or somebody from Johannesburg, South Africa does something that a guy in Los Angeles does, that a guy in Japan does, that a guy in, Estonia does, and they all compare notes. And the problem is that we're at the point where we're at right now, and they're even having this conversation as a result of 15 to 20 years of these guys doing this in the first place. She doesn't exist without the
we can go all the way back to,
and nobody would be talking, no one would care what she has to say if it hadn't been for pickup artists, if it hadn't been for the blue pill, the red pill, the MGTOW, whatever, everything that's happened in the last, and I know because I've been a part of it for the last 22 years. And so when I see little cutesy what's her fuck on every goddamn show right now, it's like, you wouldn't exist if it weren't for the guys who came before. So I want to point out the academia side of all this as well. So let's just say, for sake of argument, you go, and I don't know if she's got a doctorate, like this is Dr. Sadia Khan, whatever fucking means. Okay, if you're going to get a doctorate, and I know this because I have a degree in psychology when it comes to like a bachelor's of science in behaviorism, basically. But I do know this, is that if you want to make any kind of money in psychology, you have to get your doctorate. There's otherwise, if you get a master's, you're going to be a social worker. That's basically what you're and you went to all that school so you can be a social worker. Well, let's just say, for sake of argument, you go to school for 8 or 10 years to get your doctorate in psychology. Then you got to go and you want to go into private practice. You can either go into private practice or you can go and teach. Those are really the two things that you can do. So if you go into private practice, you've got to go get malpractice insurance. You've got to go hire somebody to do your secretary. You've got to have a place to go and do it. You've got to have all kinds of insurance. Think about the amount of money and the investment it would take to become a clinical psychologist today. And then you see somebody like John from Modern Life Dating on there who's just like making money hand over
I see what you're saying.
Sitting in a fucking big bubble bath and just like,
just imagine if you guys spent, like you said before, $50,000, $100,000 getting a PhD in psychology, and then there's people spouting psychology who got no degree whatsoever, and they're making $1 million a year.
And they never had to take out student loans. They never had to get the insurance. They never had to pay for a place to go and have a private practice or anything like that. So what happens is people like her have to go out there and become a public figure. They have to go write a book. They have to go do talk shows.
I don't blame her for that. Obviously, she wants to make a living.
I know. She has to do what everybody else has to do. And by the way, even if you're a pastor or a minister or a religious figure as well, you have to do the same thing.
Yeah.
You have to have your worship your worship session has to be online. You have to have it on YouTube. You've got to be able to respond to all the people in your parish or your congregation, whatever. It's the same principle. But we're far beyond, and I'm guilty of this, where probably everybody on this podcast is, we're our own personal brands, and we have to go out there and we have to, you appear or you disappear. I get that, but the problem is people like this have put in so much investment in themselves before they even got to this point. Now they're playing catch up to guys like, like Chris Williamson or like even Garrett right now, because Garrett hasn't even been doing this that long. Got people who have put more investment into themselves have to catch up to you.
Exactly. Yeah, it is part of the thing where they'll look at it like somebody's a psychologist or whatever, and then they see me as a performance coach, and I don't have the same degrees they do, and yet we're just way more successful.
So how do you get more successful like that? You throw firebombs.
Yeah, you throw fireballs. Exactly.
And who do you go for? The biggest dude on the prison yard.
Yeah.
So you go.
All right, so this is probably not going to be my most direct or immediately valuable video. I think I'm going to end up rambling quite a bit. But I found this conversation so interesting, and I hope you do as well. Okay, to start, to my understanding, Sadia makes two main arguments in her clip. First, she poses the idea that the Red Pill movement has made similar havens and platforms for angry, wounded men that modern feminism has also made for angry, wounded women. No contest there. I think that anyone who does not acknowledge the truth of that is foolish. After a certain point, feminism becomes about hating men and blaming the patriarchy, just as men who are overdosing on the red pill attack and blame female nature and feminism for all of the problems in the world. I see a heavy victim mentality on both ends of the spectrum. They are two sides of the same coin. The second idea that Sadia, hopefully I'm saying it correctly, Sadia poses is that these conversations attempting to teach and lead men are best suited to be in the hands of people who are at least experienced and educated rather than some 20-something-year-old with a microphone chasing internet clout. It's at this point that she does use the term boy to describe a 27-year-old man, and we could all get offended by that and try to use it to invalidate everything that she is saying based on that one word choice, but I think she specifically meant a certain type of 27-year-old. Clout chasing on TikTok with no life experience. Could that not be dangerous? Could such men actually be similar to the male feminists and feminists on the other side of the coin, parroting wokeism and political correctness and pandering for clout and attention from women? Maybe. I know for me personally, when I think of what Sadia is saying here, I think of the difference between the conversation being in the hands of men like Jocko Willink or Jordan Peterson or Andrew Huberman or Alex Hormozy, as opposed to a 27-year-old adult teenager like John Zerka.
Zerka's a clown.
In which case, Sadia would be overwhelmingly correct. And while I myself create content backed by no formal education, I took no personal offense because I also understand what she is saying. Two things can be true at once because there is no shortage of inexperienced, validation-drunk, profit-seeking ideologues making loud, controversial content for clout and cosplaying as high-value men. Such creators are very dangerous. They are like wolves pulling sheep further and further into the forest. And like I said, you see the same thing with feminist content creators and their echo chambers. And don't get me wrong, this can happen with Academician content creators as well. So yeah, I strongly disagree with the idea of invalidating anyone who speaks without education, but I don't think Sadia was making that statement of absolutism whatsoever, like the way Rolo seemed to be emotionally interpreting it and painting it out to be. In fact, despite how much hate Sadia was getting in the comments, I personally did not see anything to be outraged and offended about from what she was saying. Actually, I think from what I've seen of her, she is a net positive to these online conversations. I think she sets a better example for women to aspire to, unlike the typical delusional Miami OnlyFans types that you see in most red pill conversations. So I'm personally not entirely sure why Rolo felt like he needed to.
I'm just going to tear her down here really quickly.
But let's talk about that. In my observation, I found Rolo to be overly defensive. First, he said the origins of red pill and pickup artistry has done more for the understanding of social dynamics than academia has in hundreds of years. I disagree. I think society is always changing and evolving, and we're always learning alongside with it through studies, and the studies have to catch up. Pickup artistry and red pill is a strategic adaptation to an increasingly sexually liberal, hedonistic culture, with access to sex unlike anything anyone has ever seen before in all of human history. So this field work of picking up drunk, immoral women in nightclubs and then teaching men how to manipulate and how to smash as many women as possible with as little investment and commitment as possible is just part of the game. And could we also say that encouraging and glamorizing such behavior in men has only further fueled the fires of hookup culture and the erosion of more traditional values? Could we ask ourselves, are such men the best role models of masculinity? The types of men we need more of in society? And honestly, this whole glorified notion of field work and the spread of knowledge on how to get girls and understanding female nature, and it was as inevitable as the spread of information in the fitness industry with the introduction of the internet and social media. Ultimately, I think it's all just adaptation to navigate and be as successful as possible in the ever-changing social climate, with procreation and sex at the helm as the main drivers of human behavior. I think that if society was to swing the pendulum back to more conservative values, in order to be successful in that world, red pill would then adapt to start advising men on how to successfully court women. I digress. The second thing Rolo does is he makes it sound like Sadia was saying that only academics should be able to have these conversations. I don't know what you all heard, but I did not hear that. And yet, Rolo here immediately got defensive and ultimately hit Sadia with an emotional
"fuck you."
After that, the rest of the conversation I would roughly summarize as: academics like Sadia don't exist without the red pill and are actually just jealous. It all seemed to me to become fixated on money and talking about how academics are just mad about all of the clout and all the money that these guys with no formal education on the internet have, so now they need to make content in order to be relevant and successful and play catch up. It's like, yeah, sure, I can see that social media is the tool if you want to scale your practice or your passion to immense levels of success, but come on, educators love educating, so maybe there are academics out there that just want to share their ideas like anyone else, and odds are they will be better at it than the average Joe peddling red pill talking points, and may even begin to challenge the status quo of some of the current ideas, which is an interesting point to me, because if I was to stick my neck out for a hypothesis, maybe what could be happening here for Rolo and why he seems so defensive to me is that his current monopoly over his corner of the manosphere is being threatened by people possibly more admirable and intelligent and desirable starting to encroach on his territory. We've already been seeing the lower hanging fruit of the manosphere dropping like flies, getting exposed as low integrity losers in echo chambers, creators like MLD and Donovan Sharp and John Zerka. So who's next? Even the Tates, who are the most prolific and idolized men in the space, have been outspoken in distancing themselves from the red pill ideologues. I think that the red pill and the manosphere have done a lot of good for men. I have learned a lot myself, but I also understand that it can be very dangerous and divisive in the wrong hands, and after a certain point, too much of anything is a bad thing. And in my observation, it looks to me like the red pill isn't necessarily dying, but it is actually on the edge of evolving once again, just like it did from its origins from the boom of the pickup artistry days, and so is shedding off old skin. And I'm not sure. I don't think that Rolo is just going to roll over, but it'll be interesting to see who is left standing.
When I see little cutesy what's-her-fuck on every goddamn show right now, it's like, you wouldn't exist if it weren't for the guys who like came before.
So